Hi everyone, I just wanted to do a quick video with you about a suggestion I have about practicing close readings. So close readings, I would suggest you try and practice doing something like this at least say 3 to 5 times a week. Should take you, at first it'll probably take you a bit longer, 15 to 20 minutes, but as you pick up speed and learn to look for certain things, it would take you a shorter amount of time. By, let's say in a month's time, you should be able to get enough information from 10 minutes of a close reading in order to be able to further explain things. In May, on your paper 1 exam, you are going to be given 2 pieces of writing, usually a poem and a piece of prose, and you will have to do a close reading and analysis of those passages. So why not start here and start practicing? I'm suggesting that you practice with something that we're reading from class, but you could practice with something we've previously read, or something, say for your orals, is fine, but you should practice with something that is from IB English curriculum, because it will give you more something that you'll find on the exam. So to do this, I have my book. You can use your online source. I have a notebook is what I like to use. I also have these. If you go to the dollar store, you can use the post-it note version where you kind of keep them attached to your book. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. And at the top, I've written, because I have it in my notebook, the book that I'm using, the page, and the date. So the first thing to do is to read your passage. So for this, what I'm doing today is I'm reading the first 2 paragraphs of Jane Eyre. But you can, like I said, modify that however you need, and you can make it a little bit longer if you want. That's fine. I'm shortening it because my last video I got cut off. So there's 3 paragraphs that I'm looking at. Sorry, I said 2, I meant 3. And it begins with the sentence, "There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering indeed in the leafless shrubbery at an hour in the morning, but since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. And the cold winter had brought with it clouds so somber and a rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercise was now out of the question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight with nipped fingers and toes, and a heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgina Reed." The said Eliza, John, and Georgina were now clustered round their mamma in the drawing room. She lay reclined in a sofa by the fireside with her darlings about her. For the time, neither quarreling nor crying, looking perfectly happy. Okay, we are getting the street cleaners through now. Great. Me, she had dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance. But that, okay, I gotta be quiet for a second. I am so sorry. Making me rumble. I'm not gonna read this part. Okay, so you can read the 3rd paragraph yourselves. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to write a list of words that I think of after I finish my passage. And I call this first impressions. And after reading those 3 paragraphs, I decided that my first impression was it was kind of foreboding and bleak. So I just write down those words. Now the work comes, and I go back into my passage, and I find examples of words that match that tone. So from here, I make another list, and I start to copy out words and phrases such as cold winter wind, clouds so somber, dreadful to me, raw twilight, nipped fingers and toes, heart saddened by chidings of Bessie. So I copy out all those little phrases and fragments underneath here. and I'm not going to copy them all out in front of you because I'm keeping an eye on the time and I want to keep this under 10 minutes since my phone seems to not like to go under that. Cold, winter wind, etc. Let's see, raw twilight. She had me dispensed. Okay, and I actually have more than this that I could write, but like I said, I'm going a little bit quicker, and we'll do an example of this tomorrow together as a class, just for time's sake. So I take down and I look and I see all those words, and sometimes it can be as short as just one word, or fragments of words. I talked about this in class. You want to keep your quotations short for your in-class essays because your time spent should be on analysis and your ideas and not copying out long bits of writing. So shorten into those words that you catch on to. Raw, nipped, cold, somber, that kind of thing. Okay, so I have that down. Now the other thing to look for, and it's not always there because sometimes, especially with poetry, we don't get this necessarily, but now start to think about the opposite. So if I've decided I've picked up, my first impression is hopelessness, bleakness, that kind of thing, then I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to say, okay, can I go back into the same passage and find something opposite, which would be sort of hopeful warmth. Okay, so I'm going to write that down as a contrast. And I do find that when we discuss the drawing room, which also our narrator is not in. She's on the outside of it, but we get this scene where the clustered around their mama in the drawing room. She lay reclined on a sofa by the fireside with her darlings about her. Okay, so we have that sort of sense of like a warm, cozy scene. And if we look at below this passage here where her aunt, who we don't know is her aunt at the time, is talking, she says, oh, Jane, you would be invited here if you could be all these things. And look at all the things she has to be, childlike and beautiful and all these things. So that's also an interesting thing to take note of. So first of all, yes, we see contrast here. We see contrast from the outside to the inside. We see contrast from the narrator, where the narrator is, to the narrator being excluded. And so we want to copy down some ideas about hopeful and warmth. And so we write down our quotes there. Okay, we're down to 2 minutes, so I gotta go quicker than this. And then, okay, so and so we've copied down stuff. Next thing I want to look at and pay attention to, especially with prose, they get missed with prose. We usually think about it with poetry, and it works with prose, is syntax. What are these sentences operating like? With this passage, we have two things. We have straightforward sentences. The first sentence, subject, verb, is a straightforward sentence, and even at the bottom of the page, quite straightforward sentences. However, there's also quite a lot of modification happening, so that she gives us a bit of information, but then she's like, oh, but this is because this and this. This is because when there's no company about, Mrs. Reed has to dine early. So there seems to be a lot of different little rules that go with this house. So we can see in the way that the sentences come together that the narrator is also trying to put all these rules into the sentences, right? So we have our straightforward sentences, things that she knows about. She knows where the drawing room is. She knows they're not walking out that day. But then when she gets into what normally happens or the routines, there seems to be a lot of modifications. Even when she's told why she's not in the drawing room, there's a lot of commas and a lot of stipulation there. That in itself is something we can talk about. That may make us think, This is a narrator that's maybe a bit confused by the rules. This is a narrator who maybe doesn't agree with the rules. Maybe there's a little tone there that she's being a bit sarcastic or ironic about the drawing room. So we get a little bit more information when we think about syntax and how it gets put together. All right, and then finally, so I don't get cut off, and we'll do this a little more together as a class tomorrow, I take note of devices. And if you were taking down your examples from the first impressions down to your devices, you'll see that there's overlap. In this, you'll notice very quickly that she uses alliteration. And she uses alliteration exactly where we would pick up things for mood and tone. So that's actually really good for us because we think, okay, we're being reinforced in something that we already draw our attention to. Okay, so for now, I'm gonna jump off because I want this video to be short. But what I want you to do for tomorrow is come prepared with a piece of paper, something to work on. It can be a Google Doc. Don't think you have to write with your hands like I do all the time. And we'll start with Jane Eyre, so have access to Jane Eyre. And we're gonna practice pulling things out of passages and organizing them on paper and deciding how we can make something of this without going too far, right? Because that's always another thing that we have to worry about is we overinterpret and we say things that really we are just pulling out of nowhere, okay? So we want to root those back into the text. So for now, I just want you to know, first, read the text. Second, think about what are your first impressions of it and what is the mood and tone you're picking up on. Third is there an opposite to your impression that you can put down that builds tension and contrast? Fourth is to look at the way the sentences are to put together and what conclusions you can draw. And fifth is to find your devices. And sometimes those all overlap, and that's what we want. Okay, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow morning, and hopefully this is not as bad as I feel it is. Okay, cheers.